think. Let's talk to a man who knows exactly what is likely to happen next. Israeli Defence Forces spokesperson in Tel Aviv, Lieutenant Colonel Peter Lerner. Peter, very good morning to you.
Morning, Mike.
Thanks very much indeed for joining us. Obviously, for a lot of people on the streets of Tel Aviv and in Israel generally yesterday, it was a pretty horrific night. People worry, I suppose, that even though you've got such great defences with the Iron Dome and David's sling, that, you know, some missiles may get through, some drones may get through. You also had a terrorist attack at the same time. What's the mood of the IDF and what? Obviously, I don't expect you to tell me what you're planning to do about it, but what are you planning to do about it?
Mike, the reality that was realized last night when 10 million Israelis took cover in shelters, bomb shelters, and tried to escape the barrage of 180 ballistic missiles that Iran launched is an unbearable, unfathomable. I know most of us go through life and we don't even realize these types of threats even exist. For Israel, it has become a reality that we have, for the last year, since the 7th of October, been attacked on 7 fronts. The Israel Defense Forces, as echoed by our Chief of Staff and also by the Defense Minister and Prime Minister Netanyahu, said very clearly that we will exact a price on Iran. They can't be allowed to get away with what they did yesterday. There is a price and consequences for attacking Israel. We've shown over the last year that Hamas have failed miserably their people when they launched their attack on the 7th of October. We've shown in the last 2 weeks for Hezbollah in the north that there is a price when you attack, when you decide to join into that war on the 8th of October last year. And since then fired some 10,000 rockets, missiles and drones at us. And Iran will bear the consequences of their actions.
I mean, you guys have been incredibly successful at isolating and destroying the main leaders of Hezbollah. I was talking to somebody about this the other day, and we were wondering, why was that not possible to do with Hamas? Or was it just more difficult with Hamas?
I mean, obviously, the scenarios are completely different. On the 7th of October, Hamas, in a surprise attack, launched their onslaught against Israeli civilians, men, women, children, the elderly, and our soldiers on the border as well. So if the situation would have been turned around and IDF and Israel would have engaged on a war, then maybe we would have had similar outcome. But you know, and I think the whole element of surprise that Hamas had put them on the upper foot to begin with. But we flipped that around, and they are now incapable of conducting any serious damage to Israel. Of course, they are struggling to govern the Gaza Strip. They still want to, and we're not willing that would be the situation after the war against Hamas ends. And I think that there is always a difference when you have the initiative, and Israel, after the government instructed us to restore safety and security and to permit 60,000 Israelis to go home, we had the initiative, we took the initiative, we decapitated the organization at its most senior level of Hassan Nasrallah, but also the chain of command, the operational commanders, the tactical operatives and terrorists on the ground of this terrorist army, which is the most formidable non-state actor in the world, with an arsenal of over 200,000 missiles, rockets, drones, more than most European countries have. And that just goes to show that this terrorist army created a reality on the ground which is both unbearable and therefore warranted a preemptive action, and that is what we're currently doing. You know, we didn't want this war against Hezbollah, and it is not a war against the people of Lebanon, but how Hezbollah have built their capabilities over the last 20 years. It was only a matter of time until they implemented their version of October 7th, which would have been much more devastating because they're just probably 10 times stronger than Hamas. What we revealed yesterday is the huge efforts that they had built and engaged in on the border area of attack infrastructure. So we found in the course of several months of covert operations in the border area, bunkers, arms depots, weapons capabilities, tunnels that were made to go from inside a house to the proximity of the border to enable them to go into the house, go down beneath ground, arm themselves, equip themselves, wait for the green light from their leadership, and then storm towards Israel. And we all have this memory of the 7th of October. And as I said, 10 times stronger than Hamas. they would have been able to inflict much more devastating atrocities on Israeli population. And that is why when we realized that this is a potential situation in last year, we evacuated so many people that are now rightfully demanding to go home.
And in terms of where it all goes from here, obviously, and all the noises being made in the West about, you know, the possibility of a ceasefire of some kind, I mean, that seems even further away now, doesn't it?
So ceasefire has always been an option because, you know, we, over the last year with Hezbollah, via the US and other interlocutors, have been trying to coordinate a ceasefire with the North so that 60,000 Israelis can go home. Unfortunately, that wasn't realized, and that's why the government instructed the IDF to go on the offensive. You know, ceasefire now, I think we need to make sure that Hezbollah does not have the power to inflict damage on Israel. We need to make sure that they can't launch an attack against our border. We need to make sure that the essence, I'm not saying that that's what we aspire for, but the essence of the United Nations Security Council Resolution 1701, which explicitly dictates that there should be no weapons south of the Litani in the arms of Hezbollah, the Litani River in southern Lebanon. They failed under the watchful eye or ignoring of the United Nations peacekeeping operations. And now, because of that, we're at war. If that system would have worked and the international credit would have delivered, then Hezbollah wouldn't have been in the south. They wouldn't have had the ability to launch an attack on us like they planned. And unfortunately, it had been ignored for so many years that they just became too strong for us to bear, and that's why we're fighting. So I would say, if we're looking forward, we're focused currently on that northern front. The operations are continuing, and this morning we have more operations and more infantry capabilities going in the northern, crossing the border into the areas which we've already found attacking infrastructure, those bunkers and weapon stores and warehouses and caches that I was talking about. We've gathered intelligence that reveals more. We found even their attack plans, their maps to attack Israel. So this just goes to show how systematic it was on their behalf, and that is why we are dismantling it and destroying those capabilities. In parallel, we continue to target their leadership. So when senior leaders, new leaders that have come out and trying to take control or take initiative, we're targeting them. And finally, we're continuing to strike their strategic assets. So they have accumulated this huge arsenal, but it's of advanced weaponry. So you have cruise missiles, surface-to-surface missiles, guided missile capabilities, all things that are heavy warheads, all things that can exert a huge damage on Israel and Israeli society. These are things we're not willing to let slide. And that's why we are striking those as well. So I'd say for the immediate future, we'll be very, very much focused on Hezbollah, but definitely we will have a watchful eye, and Iran can't be allowed to get away with those ballistic missiles at us. They have built these proxies around us for a reason, and we've hurt their interests, and that's why they're getting involved. And there'll be a price and consequences for their actions.
Lieutenant Colonel Peter Lerner, thank you very much indeed. Israeli Defense Forces spokesperson talking from Tel Aviv.